Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kristen and I'd like to talk about my experiences from the April 2024 30 Inks 30 Days Challenge. So this is the monthly view of all of the inks that I used for this month. Before I dive in, I want to talk about why I participated in the challenge this month. Now, I have so many ink samples, and I've been accumulating them faster than I actually use them. When I recorded the 8 Pen Questions video, I owned 243 ink samples at that time, and I want to make a dent in this large number. So I decided to participate in as many 30 Inks 30 Days challenges as I can this year without burning out. So in contrast with using maybe 3 to 5 samples per month for my currently inked pens, I just used 30 samples in the month of April. I'd call that progress. Now, let's go through each day. So the first day was Van Diemen's Matte Half Hour with the LAMY Safari Pink Cliff. There was a bit of dryness. I had to actually clean out the pen and then try again. This next one, day 2, Robert Oster Miami in the Franklin Christoph Model 20 with an extra fine sig nib. It was dry here, but it looks like I re-dipped the pen down here to get a better writing experience. So it's a really nice color, but it seems like it's a drier ink. Ink Bar number 241, Alice Red in my Uli fountain pen. It's a really good color, but it just looked underwhelming in the writing sample. I prefer the actual ink splatter here. Pannonia Orgona was inked up in the Visconti Mirage Mythos with a fine nib. It was a struggle. I remember I had to slow down with this writing sample in order to give the ink a better chance of connecting with and transferring to the paper. And I also remember that this was the first day when I realized I don't want to write on the back side of each of these pages because of that right there, that show through. I started using only the right side of the page from then on. Day 5 is Kyona Oto Ochiguri Iro, Sailor Pro Gear Slim Yoseka Home. It was a really nice brown ink. This was the first time that I experienced a pen and ink pairing that I really wanted to use more than one day. So I had this inked up for maybe 2 or 3 days. The next one is Colorverse SM1 on day 6 and Schon Design Pocket 6 with a perspective nib. This was really good. Yeah, it looked like it started to dry out right here. So either I re-dipped or I primed the feed to finish the writing sample. But it was a really, really nice combination. It took a while for the, is that still? I don't think it's transferring to my fingers, but it took a while for the sheen to completely dry in the ink splatter. This one is day 7, Venta Inks Sandugo with Esterbrook Esty oversized in the journaler nib. It wrote fine, but I am not in love with this color, which was very interesting because there were some people in the comments that really enjoyed this ink color. So yeah, some people like blue cheese and that's wonderful. Diamine Havasu Turquoise in my Stanford Pens Jabulani, the Mermaidens pen with a fine architect nib. This was day 8 and it is really nice, like a fun summery color. I really enjoyed this combination. 30 Inks 30 Days, day 9, Colorverse, the Korea Special Tangerine in my LAMY Safari Mango. So it's a nice fruity summery combo. It was really, really good. Pannonia Inks Laboratory K10 Pilot Custom 74 Smoky Black. It was good. It performed well. Day 11, Wearingeul Metamorphosis in the TWSBI Eco Persian Green. I really enjoyed this pen and ink combination. I love how this burgundy reddish purple color contrasted with the Persian green of the fountain pen. And so it was really nice visually to see that combination. And I really loved how crisp these lines look coming out of that extra fine nib. Day 12, Colorverse Alpha Canis Majoris in the Leonardo Momento Nuvola Rose Gold. It had a medium nib and this was really good. I really enjoyed this one. I like this indigo soft blue color and it matched so very well with the pen. Pelikan Edelstein Golden Barrel in my Franklin Christoph Model 3 with a medium sig nib. It looks fine, it looks nice, but I don't like the undertone of gray in this ink, and it just didn't feel pleasant when I wrote with it. Now, Colorverse Alpha Pisceum in my Hongdian M2 with a fine nib was a dry mess. I had to saturate the feed again right here, and then it still dried out towards the end. And I hoped that the issue was actually the combination of the pen and the ink together. Like they just did not agree. So I wanted to test it out by inking up the Pilot Kakano medium nib. This is the same ink with all of these problems here. How frustrating that was. Oh my goodness. Especially in contrast with this right here. It was such a pleasant experience in my Pilot Kakano with a medium nib. Next is Krishna Dilli in the LAMY Safari Violet Blackberry with an extra fine nib. That sheen is pretty cool. It's like a greenish gold sheen. And it looks really good coming out of that LAMY extra fine nib. Day 16, Wearingeul Tom Sawyer. This looks like a really, really light ink color, but I love the color of this ink. This was one of the times where I felt a little bit bored and I wanted to challenge one of my fountain pens. I put it in one of my drier writing, more high maintenance fountain pens, the Platinum 3776 Century with the soft fine nib. That's usually a very dry writing, very temperamental nib. So I tend to fill it up with wetter and non-sheening inks, but it actually performed really well with this ink. So I was pleasantly surprised. Diamine Peach Punch on day 17 in the LAMY 2000 with an extra fine nib. It wrote perfectly. I just did not enjoy the feedback on that nib with this ink. And I was encouraged to try it again in another pen. And I think that I want to do that. I want to try this again in some other fountain pen. All right, so moving on to day 18, Akkerman Laan van Nieuw Oost-Indigo in the Aurora Matera with a fine nib. This is such a gorgeous blue ink. It's like that blue-black, the desaturated soft blue, but still a bit deep. Look at the moody splatters. I love that. That is so nice. That was one of my favorites for the month. And the same thing with Akkerman SBRE Brown. This was a really great experience. I love the ink splatter down here. This brown just looks so nice and warm here. And Inkbar number 235 Giant Blue on day 20. This was inked up in my Sailor 1911 large with a fine nib. This was also a really nice moody blue ink. Okay, so look at those two together. Interesting. And then we've got Colorverse Alpha Canis Majoris next to Giant Blue. And then here with Oost-Indigo next to Giant Blue. Yeah. So that was a really nice combination. On day 21, Van Diemen's Aurora Australis with the Kaveco Collection Iridescent Pearl. It's got a fine nib. And there is some green sheen on this purple ink. And I think this combination worked a little bit better than I thought it would. By eliminating some of the sheen in this ink, it actually eliminated most of the sheen in this ink just by using the Kaveco fountain pen. Day 22, Jacques Emerald of Chivor in the LAMY Studio Matte Black with an oblique medium nib. I really love this ink color. That red sheen and the gold shimmer just looks so very nice. I love the wetness of this ink in that fountain pen. It was just a great combination. Day 23 was Robert Oster Kansas City in my Pilot Custom 823 with a broad nib. That's such a cool splatter. It was a really nice experience. It wasn't one of my favorite brown colors, but it performed very, very well. Ferris Wheel Press Spadina Rose on day 25 in the Edison Premier Dragoness. I love this pink color right here. It looks so very good right here, and it matched perfectly with the Dragoness fountain pen. Sailor Yoromeku Yoi on day 26 was inked up in the Visconti Homo Sapiens Dark Age with a medium nib. I was hoping that a wet enough ink would allow me to see like the interesting characteristics of this ink, but it just ended up looking like a moody gray ink. It just looks great to me. Day 27 was Wearingeul Captain Hook in the Sailor 1911 large maroon with an extra fine nib. This was a really nice, very effortless experience. It just felt so effortless to use this pen and ink together. That was really good. Day 28 was Dominant Industry Matin in the Pelikan M205 Moonstone. Oh my gosh, this ink is so very light. Even looking at it in person, it is a very light ink. It was a pretty unpleasant writing experience, and then even going back to read it right now, it seems like it's just too light for me to read it. I did not enjoy this one. Day 29, Sailor Yoromeku Kokoro Uma in my Platinum Nagasawa Silhouette fountain pen with a medium nib. This brownish red sheen on the gray ink was really, really nice. I actually had to do a little swatch right there to make sure I was seeing gray ink with a reddish brown sheen. So if there is a super duper thin layer of this ink, you will see gray, but wherever it pools, it's going to look like that color. It's a solid brown sheen on top of this gray ink. I love that. And day 30 was Pelikan Edelstein Jade in the Aurora Birth of Turin with a medium nib. And that's such a happy, lovely, saturated color, a perfect ending to my 30 inks 30 days. Let me go back to the monthly view, and I want to talk about my biggest disappointments or the struggle bus combos. Day 1 was a struggle because it didn't work with my dip nib, and it stopped working with the LAMY Safari Pink Cliff, so it felt like a really, really dry, very high maintenance combination. So I did not enjoy that one. And the next one was day 4, Pinonia Orgona. That was a super light, super dry ink, Even in one of my wetter writing fountain pens, it was still a struggle. Day 13, Pelikan Edelstein Golden Barrel was also a struggle for me because that one, I don't know, it just felt dry and a little bit gritty whenever I wrote with this one. And I did not enjoy the gray undertone of this golden ink. Day 14, Colorverse Alpha Pisceum was also a struggle. You can see it was a dry mess right here. And then I tried to flood the feed again and it dried out by the time I got to the bottom of the page. It was a struggle here, even though it was a success with the Pilot Kakano. My first attempt was not a success. Okay, the next struggle bus combo was day 26. It performed flawlessly. It was just fine, absolutely fine, but it was not what I was expecting to see or experience here. It was very underwhelming. Day 28, Dominant Industry Matin. I can barely see it. At times, I could barely write with it. So that was the last one. I do have my top 10 pen and ink pairings right here in this case. But before I get there, I've got some runners up. Going back to, let me just do it from right here so that we can do it quickly. My runners up would be from day 5, Kyona Oto Ochiguri Ero. It was a really, really pleasant experience with that one in my Sailor fountain pen. That was really nice. Day 20, Inkabara Giant Blue in my Sailor 1911 Large. That was a really, really great experience as well. Spadina Rose. That was a pleasant surprise. Inked up with a juicy medium nib. This ink looks really, really good. But on some papers, it looked a little too cool toned for me. On this Suns and Tomoe River paper, it looks really nice and really warm for me. But in other papers, it was a little bit too cool toned. Day 27, Wearingeul Captain Hook is really, really nice. And the only reason why it's not one of my top 10 is because I've got 10 other pens that I really enjoy more than this one. Day 30, Pelikan Edelstein Jade is a really nice, heavy, saturated blue-green ink. And I really enjoyed that one. So on to my top 10 pairings. These pens are still inked up because I just enjoyed them so much. In 10th place is my LAMY Safari Mango with a fine nib. It was inked up with Colorverse Tangerine. I'll bring you closer to the Tomoe River paper. So this right here was a really, really good pen and ink combination, and I enjoyed everything about it. In 9th place, we've got the Stanford Pens Jabulani Mermaidens pen with a fine architect nib, inked up with Diamine Havasu Turquoise. It's just a fun combination. These two were like really nice, bright, summery colors, and I loved this color for this Mermaiden themed pen. Number 8 is the OMAS AM87 Briarwood with a fine nib, inked up with Akkerman SBRE Brown. That was a really good one too. Number 7 is my TWSBI Eco Persian Green with an extra fine nib. It was inked up with Wearingeul Metamorphosis. Pleasant, very crisp writing experience. Number 6 is the Schon Design Pocket 6 fountain pen with a perspective nib grind, and it was inked up with Colorverse SM1. It was such a really nice, juicy, but also sheeny experience with that one. Bring it over here for my top 5. These were my top 5 fountain pens for the month of April. LAMY Safari and Violet Blackberry with an extra fine nib. It was inked up with Krishna Dilli. Number 4 is the Leonardo Momento Zero Nuvola with a medium nib, inked up with Colorverse Alpha Canis Majoris. Number 3 is my Aurora Matera with a fine nib, inked up with Akkerman Laan. And number 2 is the LAMY Studio Matte Black with an oblique medium nib, inked up with Jacques Emerald of Chivor. And number 1 was a surprise to me. It's a platinum fountain pen, but this ink is gorgeous in that platinum fountain pen. This was not Sailor. Oh my gosh, it's supposed to be Platinum by Nagasawa. This Platinum Nagasawa silhouette fountain pen with a medium nib is inked up with Sailor Yuromeku Kokoroguma. This is such a juicy, wet ink. I remember it being almost too wet in one of my Franklin Christoph fountain pens, but it was perfect in this Platinum 3776 Century fountain pen. So these were my top 10 pen and ink pairings. Let me know what you think about these. Okay, so there were 2 inks that I would like to revisit. I want to just make sure that I mention those. I want to revisit Diamine Peach Punch in a different fountain pen, just because I did not enjoy it in the LAMY 2000 fountain pen. And there was one more, Wearingeul Tom Sawyer. So it was okay in the Platinum 3776 Century with a soft fine nib, But I really love this ink color, and I think I can do better with the pen and ink pairing. And I've actually put this in another fountain pen, and I've had some really great experiences with this one. Inks that I would like to remove from the box based on my experiences here are chromo shading inks. So inks like Pinonia Orgona, Sailor Yoromeku Kyoko, and Dominant Industry Matin. Did I talk about Kyoko on day 24? I feel like I did not mention Kyoko. Oh, I probably didn't mention Kyoko. So this is day 24, Sailor Yoromeku Kyoko in my Visconti Kaleido Fine Cursive Italic nib. It actually performed really, really well in this pen. I love that the Visconti Kaleido has a juicy, wet, fine cursive italic nib because it performed flawlessly with this ink. But it's such a really light color. And so I don't enjoy writing with these types of inks, and I don't enjoy trying to read these types of inks. So I'm going to be removing these types of inks from my ink collection, like the really, really pale ones and the chroma shading ones. Wearingeul Tom Sawyer is a really, really nice one, but if I go any lighter than that, I'm probably not going to enjoy myself. So I'm going to get rid of like the really, really pale inks and these chroma shading inks from my collection. I would consider purchasing Akkerman Laan van Nieuw, Akkerman SBRE Brown, Jacques Herbin Emerald of Chivor, and Sailor Yoromeku Kokoroguma. The ones that I really enjoyed but I'm not going to purchase are Wearingeul Metamorphosis because I already have Diamine Writer's Blood, and those two inks are so very similar to each other. And Colorverse Alpha Canis Majoris was a really good one as well. But I don't want to buy like a large 65 milliliter bottle just for one fountain pen, my Leonardo Momento Zero Nuvola. It matches so perfectly with that pen, but I would probably only be using it or purchasing it just to use with that one pen. I'd be more inclined to purchase like 2 samples from Venice pens and being happy with like 8 millimeters of ink versus 65 milliliters. After doing all this, I've got 185 ink samples in my collection now, and I'm bringing in 25 new samples from a recent Venice order and ink samples from my friend Nadia. So the grand total, 185 plus 25 extra ones, is 210 samples. Now that is down from 243 ink samples. So the overall number is still decreasing, even though I'm still bringing in samples. So that's the important part. The number is still decreasing. And just yesterday, I discovered that a new friend of mine is relatively new to fountain pens, and she's ready to explore inks. So I am more than ready to share what I have. So through donations and more 30 inks, 30 days ink sprints, I'm pretty sure that my sample stash is going to increase pretty rapidly this year. I don't want to forget to talk about my pens. This month, I got a chance to revisit 30 of my fountain pens. It felt like I was exploring my collection in a new way. So with each ink selection, I considered the writing experience that I wanted to have. And I definitely tested the limits on some of my fountain pens. It felt really good to go through that many fountain pens and not have to commit to writing with each pair for longer than one day. Some brought stellar experiences like these 10 right here, but others were less than pleasant, like the Dominant Industry Matin and the Pinonia Inks Orgona. But I really think that overall I did a pretty good job matching inks to pens for optimal performance. What do you think? Were there any pen and ink pairings from this month that you would not have put together? What would you have done differently? And what did you think about the format of these videos? I tried to keep them short and sweet so that I could post consistently, but were there any details that you wish that I had discussed with each pairing? Or even in this wrap-up video? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.